everyone. Welcome back to another riveting episode of the Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Ligato, and I'm going to be providing analysis and commentary on the Vladimir Putin speech at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Let's dive in and continue our analysis.
Furthermore, I propose supporting citizens who are caring for children with disabilities. Right now, they're only entitled to a benefit if they do not work. So there is no other source of income. So if they want to have a side job, they cannot do that because otherwise they will lose the benefit. And we need to remove these restrictions. We need to keep the care benefit, all while ensuring partial employment of these citizens. And to make sure there are no discrepancies, we need to enshrine in legislation the notion of partial employment. And I would like to request the Parliament to make the necessary amendments as soon as possible. Another important avenue for economic development is the expansion of entrepreneurial activity, because small and medium enterprises in Russia employ more than 28 million people. Starting from 2022, the number of self-employed doubled, rising to 7.6 million people. We need to support people who want to make business and are only taking their first steps.
So does this sound like a person who wants everyone to be dependent on the government? He's talking about self-employment, which, as you probably know by the amount of videos I'm sending out, I'm currently a self-employed person, freelance type of work, doing this content creation stuff. And so I completely love this lifestyle, the remote work lifestyle. And if you were an evil dictator, you would want everyone to work for your government-controlled mega corporation. You wouldn't be providing benefits to people to be remote worker, self-employed people like this. And so it's funny to see, because you're seeing places like Russia and China providing more benefits to people to be self-employed, to own their own business, to be entrepreneurs, and you're seeing in the West in a lot of cases.
Especially as part of the social contract, which is used for launching one's own business or having a household plot. And I think it would be the right thing to do if a participant of the social contract could get additional competencies based on the My Business Center. Of course, the government is going to pay for that. During one of the last forums, I proposed launching an umbrella mechanism for lending to SMEs. I talk about special guarantees from the SME corporations.
Okay, so just some terms here. SMEs, subject matter experts, that's another IO psychology term that we like to use a lot. And he was talking about competencies earlier. I don't really like the term competencies. It's just like a pet peeve of mine. I prefer KSAOs, which stands for knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics, KSAOs. And so we're seeing him using IO terminology in order to develop his country, and it's really cool to see. And here he's talking about further training people, even if they are small business owners and not a part of some mega corporation that is directly under the umbrella of his country. He likes the idea of continuing to help them out, continuing to improve the small business owners.
If the entrepreneurs do not have the collateral to get a credit, this mechanism is working across the regions. More than 39,000 credits have already been issued to the tune of 350 rubles. This is a good mechanism. In 2022, as compared to 22, the number of credits with underwriting for manufacturing companies increased 7 times, and 46 times for entrepreneurs in the IT sector. And of course, the demand is much bigger in industry, tourism, and information technologies, so I suggest we should expand this resource and extend the mechanism for umbrella underwriting mechanisms until 2030. And I would also like to instruct the government to set the target limits. Mr. Silvanov, I'm not talking about concrete limits, but I would like to ask you to work this through, because this is a real mechanism which helps us with the lending. I also believe we need to expand the scope of this measure. We need to include such a category as SME Plus. These are companies that cannot be considered big, but despite certain difficulties, they've managed to grow over the recent years, but due to formal criteria, they cannot apply for government support. But they are in a very important stage of growth, and they need resources, and these companies need special measures of support. So I would like to ask the government to work these measures through. On another note, there are companies that break through from the category of small and medium enterprises, and they lose the right to concessional and preferential tax treatment. So the tax burden starts to increase unless they get preferential tax treatment as part of a program for the big business. I'm not going to say anything new, but we see a situation where there are not that many incentives to grow, to go into a new weight category, because that's simply unprofitable. So by hook and crook.
So interesting what he's saying here. It's really the same for individuals and businesses, where instead of it being incremental increases, you just have like brackets. You have like particular cutoff points where if you go over this, you're like punished even more. And so what he's saying is that we should get rid of that, and it should be incremental changes to so that people aren't punished if they go over a certain amount, and they can continue to grow and can continue to be more and more productive as a small business without facing major repercussions by going into a different category of employment. I believe there's something like that in America. I'm blanking on what it's called, but it's something like you have to provide like different tax benefits. This isn't my specific part of IO psychology, but once you go over like 200 employees, you're in a completely different category, and you owe a lot more money and things like that to the government. So it's just, you don't want those stringent cutoff points, because then you're stifling small business from jumping past that point.
Companies are trying to stay in the SME sector. Sometimes they resort to fragmenting their businesses in order to keep the tax benefits, the tax service sees all of.
Okay, so I think what he's talking about here about like being in the SME sector, he's talking about small businesses. So once you become a mega corporation, you're not really like you're not doing like individual consulting or coaching types of services. You have a number of employees, and so you lose some of those tax benefits of being a small business. I believe that's what he's trying to convey here. It just isn't being communicated properly through translation, I don't think.
With that, I don't know, Mr. President, whether that happens in Algeria, but this has been happening in Russia for many years now. I think people are the same everywhere. They will always find a way out of the situation the government has put them into, if there are real restrictions on growth. But what I'm talking about are the realities of our today's life. So in that sense, there's no point in trying to catch anyone red-handed. What we need to do is to stimulate growth, removing barriers in the way of the business's growth. We need to help them grow stronger, create new jobs, and we need to set the stage for a smooth.
Wait a minute, this guy, is this Rand Paul in disguise? Like he's sounding like a libertarian right now. Like, just get big government out of things, and then businesses can thrive. It's interesting to see a Vladimir Putin type figure talk about like we have to get out of the way of small businesses so that they can grow without us stifling their creativity and productivity. And so just interesting to see that kind of libertarian strain popping up in the leader of Russia.
Transition to new categories for businesses. I would like to ask the government to come up with proposals on this subject early next year. And that should include a special transition, preferential tax treatment for them. Another important measure to support entrepreneurship is related to restrictions on inspections and other oversight mechanisms. Last year, we introduced a moratorium on scheduled inspections on all Russian businesses. Then it was extended for the current year of 2023. As far as entrepreneurs are concerned, whose activities do not carry high risks of damages, the moratorium will be in force for them until 2030. As a result of this measure, last year, across the country, 339,000 inspections were carried out, which is by 20% less than in the COVID-19 year and 5 times less than in 2019. This is a very good indicator, but still there are some provisos, as it were. I'm going to talk about that. If the businesses are not related to high risks of dealing damage to the environment or to citizens, then they should not be subject to inspections at all, either scheduled or...
Just really cool to hear him say something like that. I mean, it's like, yes, inspection should be only for high-risk businesses. I mean, if it's not, if they're not doing something wrong, like, you shouldn't be like harassing them, causing them problems. So again, another libertarian strain to his thinking that is really interesting to see in a supposed authoritarian leader here is, let's get the government away from harassing businesses with their inspections if the inspections aren't meaningful. And I saw the same thing. This is actually a controversy within various STEMs fields, is the Institutional Review Board at academic institutions is supposed to be like there to make sure you're doing ethical research, but what they end up doing is like they'll stall your research for like weeks or months just because like you don't have the fonts correct or you don't have margins correct on your document for what they say you should have. And it's just like, instead of being an ethics board, they're just like this administrative bloat within academic institutions that hinder research from being done. And there's a growing movement within academia to be like, well, wait a minute, IRB is supposed to be an ethics board and not all these other things where it's just like harassing researchers instead of doing what they're supposed to, of making sure that you're doing actual ethical research. And so it's just interesting to see the same thing occurring at different levels of analysis, the government versus academic institutions, and how all these are just related, how you can apply different concepts to different types of organization. And so that's why I, as an IO psychologist, am studying and am commentating on what's happening within governments, because they are just another type of organization, and best practices within IO psychology do apply to governments as well. So that's what I'll leave you with for this video. Thank you for sticking with me. And if you liked the video, please actually like the video, give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe to our channel. We're coming up with new content every single day. There's something to watch, something to engage with. And we just appreciate that you're sticking with us and you're one of the early subscribers to our work. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.